How does a quarterback go from being the #1 overall pick, leading his team to the Super Bowl, to being discarded like an afterthought? For Jared Goff, that nightmare became reality in just 2 seasons. Cast aside by the Rams and sent to Detroit, a franchise synonymous with failure, his NFL journey seemed all but over. But something extraordinary happened. Against all odds, the quarterback labeled as a bridge player became the heart and soul of a franchise resurgence. How did Goff defy expectations and transform both his career and the Lions into one of the most exciting stories in football? And what does his remarkable comeback tell us about resilience, redemption, and finding greatness in the face of rejection? Jared Goff's football journey began in the rolling hills of Northern California, where he was raised in Novato by parents who embodied discipline and sportsmanship. His father, Jerry, a former professional baseball player, instilled in young Jared a love for competition and a drive for excellence. From a young age, Jared gravitated towards football, idolizing the great Joe Montana of his beloved San Francisco 49ers. Little did he know, the number 16 he wore in Montana's honor would become a symbol of his own football journey. At Marin Catholic High School, Goff's arm talent was immediately apparent. Taking over as the starting quarterback during his sophomore year, he turned the Wildcats into perennial contenders, amassing nearly 7,700 passing yards and 93 touchdowns over his 3 years as a starter. His leadership and poise shone brightest in high-pressure situations, guiding his team to a state championship appearance and earning multiple league titles. But despite these accolades, Jared wasn't highly recruited, standing at a lanky 6 feet 4 inches and weighing just 185 pounds. Many Division I programs overlooked him, doubting his ability to withstand the physical demands of college football. The University of California, Berkeley, took a chance on Goff, offering him one of the only 4 scholarships he received. It was a fitting choice, given his parents' alma mater, but the expectations were sky high. Goff became the first true freshman in the school's history to start a season opener. His rookie season was a baptism by fire, as the Golden Bears endured a disastrous 1-win campaign. But even in the face of adversity, Goff's talent was undeniable. He set school records for passing yards and completions, giving fans a glimpse of the quarterback he could become. In his sophomore season, Goff began to silence the doubters. Leading Cal to 5 wins, he shattered his own records, throwing for nearly 4,000 passing yards and 35 touchdowns with just 7 interceptions. The highlight came in a thrilling victory over Washington State, where Goff threw for 527 yards and 5 touchdowns. For the first time, scouts began to see the makings of a future NFL star. By his junior year, Goff was no longer a hidden gem. He was the crown jewel of college football quarterbacks. He led the Golden Bears to their first winning season in years, throwing for a staggering 4,700 yards and 43 touchdowns. In the Armed Forces Bowl against Air Force, Goff delivered a masterpiece, tossing 6 touchdowns and no interceptions to cap off a historic collegiate career. In just 3 seasons, he had set 26 school records, cementing his legacy as one of Cal's greatest players. Off the field, Goff was as grounded as he was on it. His coaches and teammates marveled at his calm demeanor, his work ethic, and his ability to stay level-headed under pressure. He doesn't get too high or too low, his father once said, a quality that would serve him well in the tumultuous years to come. When the 2016 NFL Draft rolled around, Goff was the clear favorite to go first overall. The Los Angeles Rams, desperate for a franchise quarterback to revive their struggling team, traded up to secure the top pick. On draft day, Goff became the face of a franchise that had been stuck in a 12-year playoff drought. The weight of expectation was enormous, but Goff was ready. He saw himself not just as a quarterback, but as a leader capable of turning the Rams' fortunes around. The early days in Los Angeles were anything but smooth. Goff's rookie season was a disaster, marked by 7 consecutive losses and questions about his readiness for the NFL. Critics pounced, labeling him a bust before he had even had a chance to grow. But as we would come to learn, Jared Goff is not one to back down from adversity. His story was just beginning. Before we dive into this next chapter of Jared Goff's roller coaster journey, where triumph and heartbreak intertwine in ways only football can deliver, imagine for a second the thrill of witnessing stories like this unfold every week. Hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss another tale of resilience, redemption, and the sheer magic of the NFL. Because just like Goff's transformation under Sean McVey, there's a lot more where this came from. After a rocky rookie season in 2016, Jared Goff found himself at a crossroads. The Rams had just relocated to Los Angeles, and expectations were immense. Critics questioned his selection as the #1 overall pick, with many labeling him a bust after 7 consecutive losses to close out the season. But then came a pivotal change that would redefine both Goff's career and the Rams' future: the hiring of a young, offensive mastermind named Sean McVey. At just 30 years old, McVey became the youngest head coach in modern NFL history. Skeptics doubted whether someone so young could command an NFL locker room, but McVey silenced those doubts almost immediately. His arrival ushered in a culture of innovation and discipline, and at the center of it all was Jared Goff. Under McVey's guidance, Goff began the 2017 season with a resounding 46-9 victory over the Indianapolis Colts, throwing for 306 yards and a touchdown. It was the first win of his NFL career and a sign of what was to come. Goff thrived in McVey's offense, which emphasized pre-snap motion, play action, and precision passing. The Rams, who had finished the previous season with a dismal 4-12 record, transformed into an 11-5 powerhouse, winning the NFC West for the first time in 14 years. Goff threw for over 3,800 yards, 28 touchdowns, and just 7 interceptions, earning his first Pro Bowl nod. The turnaround was so dramatic that it felt like a fairy tale. But this was only the beginning. The 2018 season was even more extraordinary. Goff elevated his game to new heights, finishing the year with career highs in passing yards, over 4,632 touchdowns. Week after week, he delivered dazzling performances, none more memorable than a legendary Monday Night Football shootout against the Kansas City Chiefs. In what many consider one of the greatest regular season games of all time, Goff threw for 413 yards and accounted for 5 total touchdowns in a 54-51 victory. That game cemented Goff's place among the league's elite quarterbacks. The Rams entered the playoffs as the #2 seed in the NFC, and Goff continued to shine under the postseason spotlight. In the divisional round, he managed the game effectively as the Rams defeated the Dallas Cowboys 30-22. But it was in the NFC Championship game against the New Orleans Saints where Goff showed his mettle. Facing a deafening crowd in the Superdome and a 13-point deficit, Goff led the Rams to an overtime victory, making clutch throws to set up Greg Zuerlein's game-winning field goal. For the first time in his career, Jared Goff was heading to the Super Bowl. The 2 weeks leading up to the big game were filled with hope and hype. Goff's calm demeanor and precision passing were billed as the keys to unlocking the Rams' high-octane offense against Bill Belichick's New England Patriots. But what unfolded on that fateful February night in 2019 was a disaster. The Rams managed just 3 points, the fewest in Super Bowl history, and Goff struggled mightily against a brilliant Patriots defense. He completed only 50% of his passes and threw a costly interception in the fourth quarter. It wasn't just a loss, it was a humbling moment that exposed the team's and Goff's limitations. The fallout from the Super Bowl loss was swift. While the Rams still believed in Goff enough to sign him to a 4-year, $134 million extension, cracks were beginning to show. The 2019 season saw Goff's production decline significantly. He threw 22 touchdowns against 16 interceptions, and the Rams missed the playoffs with a 9-7 record. Critics began questioning whether Goff was the product of McVay's system rather than a quarterback who could elevate a team on his own. The 2020 season brought more struggles. Goff's numbers dipped again, with only 20 touchdowns and 13 interceptions. The once dominant Rams offense seemed stuck in neutral, and tensions between Goff and McVay began to spill into the open. After a Week 12 loss to the San Francisco 49ers, McVey publicly criticized Goff, stating that the quarterback needed to take better care of the football. The once promising partnership between coach and quarterback was unraveling. The breaking point came in the playoffs. Despite Goff playing through a thumb injury, McVey opted to start backup John Wolford in the wild card round against the Seattle Seahawks. An injury to Wolford forced Goff back into action, and while he managed to lead the Rams to victory, it was clear the team was looking for an upgrade at the position. A week later, the Rams' season ended with a loss to the Green Bay Packers, and so did Goff's time in Los Angeles. In the offseason, the Rams made a blockbuster trade, sending Goff to the Detroit Lions in exchange for Matthew Stafford. The trade was a stark reminder of how far Goff's stock had fallen. Once heralded as the savior of the Rams, he was now viewed as expendable, a bridge quarterback for a struggling franchise. The move was bittersweet for Goff, who admitted the trade came out of nowhere and left him with a sense of unfinished business in Los Angeles. But what seemed like the end of Goff's story was, in fact, the beginning of a new chapter. His time with the Rams had shown glimpses of greatness, but it was in Detroit, a city known for its grit and resilience, where Jared Goff would redefine himself. When Jared Goff was traded to the Detroit Lions in early 2021, it was more than just a career reset, it was a reckoning. The quarterback who had once been the centerpiece of a Super Bowl contending team now found himself on a franchise synonymous with struggle. The Lions were in the midst of a complete rebuild, fresh off a 5-win season and a decade of mediocrity. For Goff, it wasn't just about proving he could still play at a high level. It was about proving he belonged in the NFL at all. Detroit embraced him in its own way. The city, known for its grit and determination, saw in Goff a mirror of its own story, someone discarded and written off, but still capable of greatness. Lions head coach Dan Campbell and general manager Brad Holmes were vocal in their support of Goff, but actions spoke louder than words. They knew they weren't inheriting a finished product. Instead, Campbell worked on rebuilding Goff's confidence, while Holmes began constructing a team designed to support their new quarterback. The 2021 season began just as many had feared, with loss after loss. By midseason, the Lions were 0-8, and Goff had struggled to find his footing. Critics were merciless, labeling him a placeholder quarterback, someone who was simply keeping the seat warm until Detroit found a young star in the draft. But within the locker room, a different story was unfolding. Goff's quiet leadership and unwavering work ethic were beginning to resonate with his teammates. As one Lions player later said, "He's the kind of guy you want in the trenches with you." It wasn't until Week 13 that the Lions finally broke through. Facing the Minnesota Vikings, Goff engineered a last-second drive, capped by an 11-yard touchdown pass to rookie wide receiver Amon-Ra St. Brown as time expired. The celebration wasn't just about a win, it was about a team finding its soul. Goff's reaction, emotional and raw, told the story of a man desperate to prove himself, not just to the league but to his teammates and the city of Detroit. Despite finishing the season with a 3-win record, the seeds of something special were planted. The Lions rallied behind Goff in the second half of the year, going 3-2-1 over their final 6 games. Much of this turnaround was credited to Dan Campbell's decision to hand play calling duties to offensive coordinator Ben Johnson, whose creative schemes began to unlock Goff's potential. In those closing weeks, Goff threw 11 touchdowns and just 2 interceptions, showing glimpses of the quarterback who had once led the Rams to greatness. As the 2022 season approached, expectations were still low. The Lions were seen as a rebuilding project, not a contender. But something had changed. Goff entered the season with a newfound confidence, bolstered by a revamped offensive line and a rising star in Amon-Ra St. Brown. In their first game against the Philadelphia Eagles, Goff threw for 2 touchdowns in a hard-fought 38-35 loss. It wasn't a win, but it was a sign that this team and its quarterback were different. The first half of the season was a roller coaster. The Lions started 1-6, and questions about Goff's future resurfaced. But just as the team had done in 2021, they refused to fold. Goff, in particular, showed a resilience that silenced many of his critics. After a win against the Green Bay Packers in Week 9, Goff spoke openly about the team's belief in themselves. "We know we're better than our record. It's about staying the course and finding ways to win." From that point on, the Lions were nearly unstoppable. Over their final 10 games, Detroit went 8-2, finishing with a 9-8 record and narrowly missing the playoffs. Goff was sensational during this stretch, throwing for 17 touchdowns and just 1 interception. His chemistry with St. Brown, as well as the emergence of rookie Jameson Williams, gave Detroit one of the league's most exciting offenses. Behind a dominant offensive line, Goff was sacked just 23 times all season, the fewest of any quarterback who started all 17 games. But Goff's resurgence wasn't just about statistics. It was about leadership. For a franchise that hadn't tasted postseason success since the early 1990s, Goff became the face of hope. He embraced the city's blue-collar ethos, leading by example and earning the respect of fans and teammates alike. His post-game interviews were marked by humility and gratitude, reflecting the kind of player Detroit could rally behind. One of the defining moments of the season came in Week 18. Facing the Green Bay Packers on Sunday Night Football, the Lions had already been eliminated from playoff contention earlier in the day, but instead of rolling over, Detroit played like a team with everything to prove. Goff outdueled Aaron Rodgers in a 20-16 victory, eliminating the Packers from the playoffs and sending a clear message to the league. The Lions were no longer pushovers. For Goff, it was personal. The quarterback who had been cast aside by the Rams was now outplaying one of the league's all-time greats in a primetime game. "We're building something here," Goff said after the game. And this is just the beginning. As the 2023 season loomed, Goff's future in Detroit was no longer in question. The Lions, once mired in mediocrity, were now viewed as legitimate contenders in the NFC. Goff's transformation from cast-off to cornerstone was complete. His 29 touchdowns and 7 interceptions in 2022 were among the best numbers of his career. But it was his poise and leadership that truly stood out. In many ways, Goff's journey mirrored that of the Lions themselves, a story of perseverance, grit, and the power of belief. For a quarterback who had once been defined by his failures, Detroit offered a chance to rewrite the narrative. And Jared Goff didn't just take that chance, he ran with it. Jared Goff's story is proof that in the NFL, setbacks don't have to define you, they can reshape you. And as we reflect on how far he's come, it's impossible not to think of the many other players whose journeys mirror his highs and lows. If you've ever been moved by stories of resilience like Goff's, where triumph is found in the face of doubt, then you're in the perfect place to hit that like button and subscribe, so you never miss these powerful tales of grit and glory. Goff's time in Detroit has been more than a comeback, it's been a reinvention. When the Rams sent him to the Lions, it seemed like a career death sentence. But Goff used that moment as a spark to reignite his passion and redefine his legacy. For the first time in years, he wasn't seen as a savior. He was part of a collective effort to rebuild. And in that role, Goff discovered the leader he was always meant to be. Detroit gave him the one thing Los Angeles never fully could: an environment where failure was a chance to learn, not a reason to be discarded. With every clutch throw and every game-winning drive, Goff earned not just the trust of his teammates, but also the respect of a city desperate for hope. What makes Goff's journey so unforgettable is its emotional depth. The statistics are impressive: 29 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, and a passer rating among the league's best in 2022. But his greatest achievement lies in his ability to lead a team out of darkness. For a Lions franchise that hadn't seen postseason success since the early 1990s, Goff didn't just bring stability, he brought belief. Perhaps the most telling moment of his redemption came in Week 18 of the 2022 season. With their playoff hopes dashed earlier in the day, the Lions had nothing tangible to play for against the Green Bay Packers. Yet Goff and the Lions approached the game like it was their Super Bowl, by defeating the Packers and eliminating their divisional rivals from postseason contention. Goff sent a message to the league: the Lions were no longer an afterthought. In moments like these, Goff's quiet confidence shines brightest. He doesn't seek the spotlight, He earns it. And while his story is far from over, it's clear that he's turned a once unlikely redemption arc into one of the NFL's most inspiring narratives. But for every Jared Goff, there's a Baker Mayfield, a quarterback whose story is still being written. Both were drafted first overall, both faced setbacks, and both have questioned their place in the league. The difference? Goff has already carved out his redemption. If you want to explore how Baker Mayfield's journey stacks up and whether he can find his own resurgence, click the video popping up now.